Hello everyone, it's Anya here from the Psychedelic Society and welcome to our webinar series for Anthropos Festival. So just to say quickly, we're super sorry we cannot be dancing in a forest now and doing this live with live audience. But yeah, it's good enough to connect. We're happy that we can all be here and talk about those important issues that we would talk otherwise, again, sitting in nature. So welcome everyone, and I'm going to invite my first guests. I have 4 guests today, and we're going to be switching between them. But let me introduce Sam Gandhi first, who is a researcher into. Sam, tell me what do you research? What do you do?
Hi everybody. So my academic background is in ecology, ecological science, which I have a PhD in. And I'm a research collaborator with the Centre for Psychedelic Research at Imperial College London. And my particular area of interest, research interest, is the capacity of psychedelics to connect us to nature and the implications of that.
Thank you, Sam. And now my next guest is Nikki Weird, who's an amazing, wonderful woman in psychedelics, and not only. She is one of the directors of Breaking Convention, one of the best conferences in the world. She's also an editor of many really beautiful, great books. And she's a mother, she used to be in a punk rock band, and she's an ecologist, she's everything. So I'm going to invite her to screen to say more. She's laughing already. She's a witch also. Nikki, I think your camera froze. Oh, okay, here it's working. You're right. Can you just tell us quickly about who you are and what is your special connection with nature and this subject?
So I'm Nikki Weird, and I don't know, I guess my special connection with this is so my background is as an academic is also in ecology, which I managed to squeeze in between being a mum and then being editor of the Psychedelic Renaissance. I managed to get a degree and most of a PhD in ecology. And I'm very interested in the way that the sort of the construct of nature and human is like sort of potentially divisive. And it's one of the ways that psychedelics dissolves that boundary between those two categories, thus creating and allowing that connection to shine through, which is what we're all after, because we know in our hearts that we're part of nature. So it allows us to see that, it reveals it.
Completely.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to invite our third guest for now. Soon I also will invite Darren Springer, but I can only invite 3 people at a time, so bear with me. So Mercedes, an activist, a writer, and yogi. What else, Mercedes? Tell us a few words about you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Anya. My name's Mercedes Grant, and I'm currently living on the west coast of Canada on unceded territories of the Klahoose, Schlamin, and Hamako First People. I wear many hats. I'm a writer and a trauma-informed yoga instructor. I'm also on the steering committee for the Psychedelic Psychotherapy Forum that's happening in October virtually, which Sam is also a part of. And I'm co-producing the Psychedelic Renaissance documentary. My connection to this is personal, and collectively been working with my community here, using and building relationship with psychedelics around deep adaptation and decolonization work and anti-racism work. So yeah, many hats. Thanks.
Thank you. We all have many hats. It's good. People of the psychedelic renaissance. Brilliant. So maybe, Sam, I would like to start with asking you what actually is nature connectedness, because it's not as easy as connection with nature, right? We spoke about 2 weeks ago about it. Tell me more.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to define what we actually mean by nature connectedness, or relatedness, as it's sometimes called. So this is a specific measure, and it's sort of denoting one's experiential sense of oneness with nature, one's self-identification with nature, the degree to which you feel part of the natural world. So this is obviously we are always part of nature. We can't not be part of nature. So it's not measuring the literal connection, but rather the awareness of that connection. And this is something really important, because it's although it sounds maybe a little bit kind of ethereal and sort of airy fairy in a sense, like it's the awareness of that connection has very real, tangible effects on one's mental health and well-being, and also even behavior, pro-environmental behavior. So it's a very important thing to measure and assess, and also hopefully, given where we are in the world right now, increase as well in people.
So I think, Nikki, just when you were introducing yourself, you mentioned you're interested in this aspect, and me too, that often we see ourselves as us and nature. Why do you think it's happening? Why are we in this situation where we no longer see ourselves as part of it?
So I would date that back to about 100 years ago, where the switch from living in the countryside to living in a built environment happened for most people that were alive on the planet at the time. We went from a percentage of 20% of people living in a built-up environment and everyone else in the country, to a reversal of that, where only 20% of the people lived in the country. And that was at the end of the 19th century. And today the situation is even more extreme than that. Most people live in cities and towns, where it's quite hard for a lot of people, the majority of people, to feel that connectedness and be aware of that connectedness to nature, as Sam very cogently said. Because when I look out of the window here, I can see more buildings and a wall. And I live in a very small town, which is much easier to feel that connectedness. But just from my day-to-day life, I live mostly, if I don't make the effort to go outside, I'm inside four walls. And when I look out of the box that I'm in, I just see more boxes. So in that sense, it's literally shut away from physically and culturally and all other ways from the being part of nature.
Yes.
Yes.
And
So I think it's to do with the built environment, and also the way that we have to spend our time working, which is mostly just doing things which have nothing to do with the cycles of nature, and it doesn't change seasonally. We very much are ruled by the clock.
That's true. Do you guys have anything to add, Mercedes or Sam?
Yeah, well, just I think absolutely agree with Nikki. I think there's been a few waves of disconnection. I think it goes way back. I mean, like, I think the Abrahamic religions have a fair bit to answer for. You know, the whole story of like the Garden of Eden and the fall from grace. That was man disconnecting from nature in some way. And the Bible sort of says to kind of use nature how you see fit, which isn't the most kind of like, it's putting man at the top of the pyramid and kind of imposing this feudal system on nature as a resource to be exploited, and that's not an ecologically viable or sustainable mindset or perspective to have. There was the scientific enlightenment as well, which kind of then caused another rift between mind, man, and nature. And the most recent one, after our increasing urbanization, is technology. Is the increasing technological kind of usage seems to be the most recent wave. So television and the internet has also, although the internet is a great tool of connection when and technology can be a connective tool. Certainly technology is kind of part of the most recent wave, like television, computer games, things like these have served to disconnect us from nature more.
One of the dangers of the internet and TV is that it makes us feel like we are connected to nature by looking at a picture of a tree. That's that's a really false thing. It distracts us from the reality of being out there smelling and touching and feeling the wind on our skin. So it can be a separator in that way, where we think that it connects and it doesn't.
Yeah.
And there's this trend. First of all, I just need to quickly say, Nikki, we can hear you. Your volume is very low. I'm wondering if there's any way to put up the microphone closer to you, or not sure. Oh,
I'll try and talk louder.
Thank you. Sorry, guys. There's technical issues with Crowdcast and with our internet connections and microphones. Unfortunately, as I said, it would be nice to sit in the forest now and talk about it faces to faces, but we're here on the internet. So just wanted to, Mercedes, do you have anything to add to this as well? Why are we so disconnected now?
Yeah, thank you. I think all those points that Sam and Nikki made, I agree with as well. And just thinking more about, colonialism and the capitalist systems that we're in and how they encourage us to find that connection in external ways through consumerism and buying things and like almost purposely keeping us disconnected so that we don't see the interconnectedness on an everyday basis with each other and with nature. I'm fortunate to live very remotely on an island in the middle of nowhere, so I'm in the forest all of the time. And part of the reason I did that was to get out of the city, but also for economic reasons. It's much more affordable, and I have the privilege of being able to do that. And I'm seeing that wave is sort of is changing with this generation. I'm noticing a lot more people starting to move out of city locations and into rural spaces, and how that's having an effect as well.
Yes. And why do you all think, and maybe I would like Mercedes you to comment first, what is the urgency now? Why do we have to connect with nature now? Why so quick?
Yeah, well, obviously we're, in the middle of a climate and ecological collapse, arguably, I would say we are, and starting to watch what I hope is the beginning of the end of racial capitalism and colonialism to some degree. It's going to be a long process. Yeah, but I think that nature plays a huge role in being able to remind us that we are connected to each other in really profound ways, and that our effects, that every action that we take has an effect on each other, whether that's good or bad. And obviously for mental health reasons, it's incredibly important to be out in nature. It's Sam's research shows that, and we know that as beings, when we go into nature, that decompression that we feel, whether it's in a city park or whether you live rurally, it's essential. It really is essential, I think, for humans to be able to be with the trees and to be able to treat the beings around us also as living beings and not just commodities that we're used to extracting from.
Yes, and Sam, can you comment a bit more about how nature connectedness helps mental health and well-being?
Yeah, sure. So it's so nature on a few different ways. So nature connectedness itself is associated with things like increased vitality, life satisfaction, life meaning, lower anxiety levels. It also predicts when you're rate higher in nature connectedness and you're actually having contact with nature, you tend to rate higher in intrinsic rather than extrinsic aspirations. So intrinsic aspirations are things like self-development and community and things like this, and extrinsic is things like fame and material things and social image. So that's a really interesting shift. It also, higher nature connectedness in combination with nature contact predicts more transcendent and awe-inspiring experiences in nature. And that's really important because awe is a very important, naturally therapeutic emotion to feel, and associated with things like well-being, life satisfaction, even lowered inflammatory responses. It even affects our physiology as well as our psychology. And also importantly, nature connectedness is a strong predictor of value for time spent and contact with nature. So the higher you rate in nature connectedness, the more likely you are to spend time out in nature. And the health benefits, the mental health benefits and physical benefits of actually spending time in nature are even broader and more expansive than the nature connection. And nature connectedness is also a mediator. So attentional capacity, well-being, and other sort of benefits from spending time in nature are or can be enhanced by the degree of connectedness you have.
Yes, thank you, Sam. Nikki or Mercedes, do you have anything to add to what Sam said?
Yeah, I'd like to add the way that what part of the nature connectedness for me is realizing and being explicit about the fact that I'm related to everything else that's alive. When my children, who are now 20 something, when they were very little, I was explaining to them as we walked to and from school how the trees that we walked past were related to them, just like their cousins and their uncles are. And I think growing up and really knowing that kind of relationship inside you, that you are part of life, is really essential to being able to care for those things. So that's something that I'd like to add to the thing that Sam and Mercedes have just said.
Thank you.
Nice.
Yes, I remember. My mom always brought me up and told me this tree is that and this is that, and we went picking mushrooms. I always kind of felt that. To me, always we are animals. We are part of it. So yeah, I agree. So thank you for being an awesome mom and bringing new awesome humans up. So yeah.
The only other urgency thing I would add to that is that it's over 20 years now when I went to a conference, which was about, I think it was the first major conference on the end of peak oil. Have we reached peak oil? So this issue of coming to the end of an economy based upon consumption of material goods has been posited for a very long time, but the urgency of it is growing exponentially year by year. And it's about time that we stopped looking at things we can buy and instead started to think about things that we can just do and enjoy.
That's true.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say you're probably gonna touch on this soon because it's all interconnected. But around what Sam was saying about how nature can impart that sense of awe and wonder, and how that can translate to wanting to protect and preserve nature is really obviously very urgent right now too. And then obviously how psychedelics can help to shift that connection also. Yeah, I spent a lot of time. That's how my parents were very good at taking me for hikes, and my mom always encouraged me to hug the trees. I still do now, you know.
We all do.
Yeah.
it's not a gossip about psychedelic people. We all do it.
I'll do it.
So just quickly, just throwing to any of you really. So how does it's quite obvious, but let's just comment about it. How does nature connectedness boost those environmental behaviors?
So yeah, just to sort of jump in there, like it's interesting in that so there's other research showing that when you acknowledge nature, it acts as a broad connector, not just to nature itself, but to yourself and other people. And what this is showing is that your awareness is being externalized to some degree. It's taking the focus off yourself and expanding it outwards. And we see this really interesting thing that as your pro-environmental awareness goes up, your pro-sociality, your measures of pro-sociality, or the intent to benefit other humans also goes up. They're so related, you can't change one without changing the other. And what this shows is that there's this externalizing of your awareness and your priorities. And so that's really interesting. And it seems like as your connection to nature goes up, your care for and your concern for it kind of goes up as a side effect of that deepening connection. So that's part of it.
Thank you. Anything to add from you, Nikki or Mercedes? Nothing? Cool. I think Sam can pretty much explore the subject. So I want to hear from all of you, and this is where I'm going to soon invite Darren over, but quick question, how one connect with nature? What are your tips of connecting to nature? And maybe let's start with Nikki.
Okay, so obviously get outside, which is good for you on all sorts of mental and psychological levels, as Sam has very well described already, but also, as he said, on the physical level. I've been reading a lot recently about how damaging the sedentary lifestyle is that we have with a lot of us today. The number of steps and the amount of, which is the sort of the Fitbit generation type, generation, which I am one of, where you count your steps every day and see how many thousands you get. But that's a sort of a crude measure, but it's quite useful. But it's to do with how active you are in sort of the pace that you go at and things like that. And if you can get outside into somewhere green, then you're moving much more, which is very good for you. and you're doing it in a kind of not exact in a non-competitive way, which is nice. So those kind of things are very good. And if you can manage to get out somewhere where there's lots of plants, then you're more likely to come into contact with gases in the air and the different microbiota, which are very good for your system to come into contact with on a frequent basis. So those kind of things are a good thing to do. Just make yourself go outside for minimum 1 hour a day and be active in some kind of green space, even if it's just walking down a street that's got trees in it. Anything that is better than just being in a place that's just concrete. And when you can do, getting out sort of a bit further afield from home. It doesn't need to be very far, maybe only a mile or two, but going somewhere that's like a destination that's either a woodland or a river or somewhere that's a bit more scenic, so you can look at it and feel that sense of awe, which allows you to be sort of triggered into the awareness of all this, the amazingness that is life, which includes, of course, ourselves. So yeah, just get outside as much as you can. And it doesn't have to be like in a sort of running kind of way. You can just walk around, but try and walk as briskly as possible. Something else that's quite a good practice, though, is to go somewhere that's particularly lovely and just sit there for at least 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and let nature unveil herself to you, because you're not going to see animals and birds going past you if you're just constantly walking around. So go somewhere with something to sit on, sit down for at least 20 minutes and just let things happen around you, at which point things will stop being quite so scared and come close again. And that can be some of the most powerful things that you can do, particularly if it's in an enhanced state of consciousness.
Yeah, and just to build on what Nikki said there, and I absolutely agree. There was a recent study, and it was a very robust study, and it used had a very high number of samples, and it was looking at the effects of nature and green spaces on all manner of mental and physical health measures. And the conclusion of this study was 2 hours of nature a week, over a week, and it doesn't matter if you get it all in one go or spread over the whole days in the week. 2 hours is the magic, is the minimum, and it sort of time, and it gives one it's a significant protector of health on all sort of measures. And it doesn't matter, you don't have to be in pristine wilderness. You can be in an urban green space, a park with some trees and some grass and maybe some water. You don't even have to be exercising. They took into account the effect of exercise on health, and they found that even just sitting, as Nikki was saying, is itself really restorative. But just talking about connectedness itself, and sort of separating it just from contact. So nature connectedness it's an environmental attitude, and it's fairly deep set. And it seems childhood contact exposure to nature is a sort of later life predictor of it. But the research reports a range of things. So some research shows simple passive contact with nature can increase your nature connectedness. Other research shows it might do that, but it might only be a transient increase and then it will go back down. Some research shows no change at all following passive contact with nature. So there's a huge range going on there. Speaking to some of the top sort of researchers who invent these measures and have been doing these research, the basic consensus is it's a fairly deep set attitude or perspective, and kind of like a personality trait. Actually, it's not an easy thing to shift, but here there's an interesting sort of science-backed, very simple, accessible approach I can kind of give to people to maybe play with. And this is a study conducted a few years ago, because there's a lack of proven interventions to increase nature connectedness in a sustained, enduring way. And this is why psychedelics are exciting. But one way of going about this that they showed from this study is they took a sample of people and split them in two, and they got one group of people to record 3 things a day that they love or enjoy about nature for 5 days. They got another group to do the same, but record factual things about nature. The factual recording group showed no change in their nature connectedness, whereas the people recording things they love or enjoy showed a substantial and sustained change in their nature connectedness. And this is an important point. This is an emotional, experiential, empathic thing, this nature connectedness. It's not something intellectual in that sense. Like, yes, your knowledge of nature can feed into it later down the line, but it's primarily at its core an emotional, experiential perspective.
So
Thank
my
you,
practice
Sam.
of when I go out for a walk, saying to different plants and trees, going hello, and also being excited about seeing different flowers and going, ooh, that's probably a good thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. I'll keep
I
doing
bet
it.
you rate pretty high, Nikki. I bet you rate pretty high in nature connectedness.
Oh, I bet. Sam, I will
Yes.
invite Darren over, but stay with us. I will remove you from here, but I will call you back at some point because I will need you still, just not now.
Cool. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's see, Darren, we will be inviting you on screen now, so get ready. I hope it works. It seems like we're connecting with Darren. Hello, Darren.
Hello, Anya. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Amazing. Could you just quickly tell us what do you do in life and what is your connection to nature?
Okay, so what do I do in life? I'm just on life's journey, working it out. But as far
Aren't
as
we all?
but with that said, I think I've been invited here today, maybe based on my background in primarily working with young people in the local community in East London, in a food growing, horticultural, permacultural background. I work primarily with young people who've been kicked out of school, just come out of prison and stuff like that, and engage them in nature and outdoor activities and remind them that they are nature. With that said, yeah, that's what I do.
Brilliant. So I have a few questions to you. How one can connect with nature? Well, you said already horticulture, but tell us more about how you engage young people and to have this connectedness with nature.
Okay, so the first step that when working with the young people I work with is reminding them that they are nature and nature is inside of them. And we start to get them to check themselves, look themselves in the mirror, see the cycles, the patterns within themselves that exist in nature. So the first thing is just to remind, although it's great to get outdoors, which it's all about, it's, you know, also really remembering that nature emanates from yourself. And so we do activities and stuff that make sure that connection is clear, you know, whether it's your own daily cycle that you go through and routines and patterns that you have that you can find exist in nature, or to your weekly, monthly, yearly cycles. We all have cycles and patterns that we live by, whether we're aware of it or not. And my goal is to make the young people aware of their patterns and their cycles and show them relevant ones in nature. So then they see that direct connection, because, you know, part of it is basically to say that we are, and I've heard it said already, we are nature. It's not a thing like how do we get connected with nature. I don't, that's not the approach that I have. I'm like, we are nature. You're just not aware of it. If you're not aware of it, that is. And there's ways to become aware of it if you choose to. So mostly young people that I work with are not consciously wanting to engage in nature. You know, the first few sessions are a struggle or a fight to get them acknowledging that they are nature. But, you know, a few weeks down the line, the whole idea is that, you know, part of the rites passage that we have for the young people is basically taking them from East London, Hackney, that's where a lot of them are primarily based, and we take them up to Epping Forest. So unfortunately for a lot of these young people, there's no more rites of passages in place, you know, outside of the local youth club and stuff like that, that really supports them becoming young boys to men. So what we've discovered is just a train journey from Hackney to Chingford, Epping Forest, getting them to take their first steps in the forest and seeing things like trees, butterflies, worms, really is a healing modality, as well as a way that they connect. So, you know, a few weeks later on down the line, they'll be picking blackberries, you know, just on our path, on our journey. It's just about showing them, you know, on their day-to-day path, the ways that they're connecting and can stay connected. That's some of the things that we do. But we also get philosophical as well, and also remind them, obviously me coming from a Asian indigenous interest, I always highlight that, you know, these models, like things like permaculture, for example, something that I went and studied a few years back and, you know, and teach, you know, my studying of that made me realize that, again, it's nothing new, you know, permaculture is nothing new. It's in a sense where this is what indigenous groups, you know, who are very sustainable in their approach to life in general, operate. And I heard it mentioned, about, being aware that you're connected to nature. These people have no choice but to be aware that they're in nature, they're from nature, they're part of nature, they work with it day in, day out. So that's why I think they don't have the challenges necessarily that we have, or that I have to deal with the young people that I work with. So I show them examples of young people, maybe in the Congo, maybe in India, that are similar ages to them, and the responsibilities that these young people have, everything from having to take a machete and go right into the forest and harvest some wood, maybe. Whereas if I gave my young people a machete in East London, they start swinging it around, and so it's just showing examples and representations of just how there's young people that really engage with nature. It's really cool, and they're warriors as well with it, So it's just kind of making it cool and fun, and showing some of the philosophical side of things as well from young people's perspective.
That's lovely. Sounds great. I'm also curious to ask you. So when you originally meet them, what is the scope of the disconnection with nature? Is it really bad, or do kids have some kind of something going on? Is it hard work to make them realize?
If I be honest, it's hard work. Everyone's different at the end of the day, but for the most part, most of these kids, like myself, I grew up in the same areas that they live in. It's a concrete jungle. So, what we consider nature to us is just the local park, which might have loads of dog shit around, and it's just, but that's our nature. For the most part, me growing up, I think I was fortunate enough that I had a quite diverse community. And if I be honest, I had a few white friends, and they like going to the forest. We used to jump on our bikes and we'd go to the forest and start fires and stuff like that. We'll just try and catch squirrels and, see if we, it wasn't to engage with nature. We was like trying to destroy nature in some ways, but it was our way of getting out to nature. We'll jump on our bikes, but for the most part, because of the young people now and the territorial stuff, and there's a lot going on where they don't leave the area, so they stay nowadays within a postcode, let alone get out the city. They don't leave the postcode area. So if you're in a postcode that doesn't have much green life, you're not used to nature. Like myself, I grew up in a block of flats. I lived on the 10th floor. So my nature was our balcony that we shared with pigeons. Our balcony got taken over by pigeons. So this is just but that was my nature. I really appreciate that. I got many times to study the pigeons on my balcony, and seeing pigeons being born and stuff like that. But no, I didn't have access to, the wider range of nature like my parents and my grandparents told me about, where they came from, that they was envious of leaving and coming to somewhere that was very grey and dull compared to what they were used to when they thought about nature. So there's some challenges. There's psychological challenges, there's historical challenges, as well as geographical challenges in engaging young people. But in essence, I've got a trick them if we want to know, because a lot of the work I actually do with them is through enterprise. That's like food enterprise, and everything kind of is a financial drive for them. They want, a lot of them have got in trouble for wanting to make money, basically. So the idea is setting up like food enterprise projects and getting them to understand nature through enterprise. And then through the enterprise, that's how we weave in all the nature stuff. And then, so they want to sell drugs, for example. And then my goal is to get them selling salad bags instead of weed bags, as I always mention. And once we got them selling the salad bags, or even pre-selling the salad bags, what we've discovered is that, my first activities that I do with them are geared around the enterprise. But the very first session I do with the young people, we get them seed sowing. We get them sowing seeds, and by the following week, hopefully, we get some germination. So already, because it's got to be tangible results with young people. You can't just talk nature and nature. Like, they've got to see things and see results as well. So by doing some seed sowing the very first week, and by the week they return, there's some germination going on. They go from, I don't want to be here. Who wants to know gardening? So you must be doing a gardening teacher because you failed in life. I've heard all these kind of things in my teaching. But by week 2, week 3, they're like, oh, how's our seedlings getting on? And they're starting to engage and showing an interest, and then they start wanting to take care and nurture their plants. And then we give them the same understanding, and that's the same care and nurturing that I guess their parents should or has given them, and that they should also be giving themselves as well as other people. And if we don't take care of the plant, what's going to happen to the plant, and all that good stuff. And if they want to make loads of money, then they've got to take care of the plants. So this is kind of the way I go about it.
There's a very good markup on micro salads.
We do the math. That's exactly what we do, Nikki. You know, without going on, but we, you know, the workshop is geared around, you know, how much does a pack of seeds cost? You know, and then how many seeds are in a pack? How many plants will that grow? And then if you're looking at, you know, various plants, you've got cut and come again varieties that keep growing, and oh mate, like, and then they do the maths, and at the end of it, they're like, all right, I want to be a gardener.
That's
Good.
great. I saw the video of you taking your niece out for a walk in the woods the other day. It was wonderful to see how excited she was about all the different things that she'd discovered with you. It was great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, wicked. Yeah, you know, it's they bring the life out of me too. So no one wants to hang in the forest with me. It's like, no, you know, so I got to go with my nieces and all the little people now. Everyone's too old to go and have fun. That is, you know, climb trees and stuff.
Yeah. And it's important to do it because it's fun, isn't it? I know we've been talking about the health and psychological benefits, which is great, but you've got to be motivated to do it because you want to do it. Otherwise, you're not going to carry on doing it, and it's not going to actually strike at the heart of what we're trying to achieve here. So
very much so.
True. So now, obviously, we're in coronavirus. Everybody's a gardener now. Seed deficiencies in the shops for months now. So yeah, it's a good thing, isn't it? It's great that everybody's gardening. But if someone doesn't have a garden, what can they do at home? There's some plants we can grow at home, right? Do you guys have any tips for people how they can nurture their nature connectedness in their homes?
Well, just that, I'll jump in there. I'll say just that because growing up, being in the households that I was in, and most of my family, or all of my family coming by way of the Caribbean, we didn't have the Caribbean environment living on the 10th floor. I think the largest house there was my grandmother's house. She had a garden and tried to turn it into little Barbados. But what you would find in all of my aunt and uncles and places inside the house, it was green. You would feel that the Caribbean was inside the house. You can bring nature inside. Nature is everywhere. It's like we're creating these separations, like, you know, because it's outside, and like you can't bring it inside, you can bring nature inside. So just like you said, even if you live in, you know, urban setting, so to speak, and all you've got is a balcony, you know, that's what you've got, and that's the space that you work with. And some people say, you know, I don't even have a balcony because I do a lot of working in the community in urban growing. Some people don't have a balcony. I'm like, hopefully you've got a windowsill. If you've got a windowsill, there's some stuff that you can grow on your windowsill. And people say, well, what should I grow? What can I grow? And I'm like, you grow what you like to eat, what you use. You know, you might eat mangoes, and you can't grow mangoes on your windowsill. But you know, there's other things that you may, in addition to your mangoes, may complement the mangoes. You know, or certain fruits. You can grow tomatoes on your windowsill. You can grow herbs on your windowsill that can go in dishes that you make every day. So you're not restricted to what you can grow really in the home. When it comes to using or working things that you're going to be using in the long run, which should keep you engaged in growing it, and you should then get the results because you're going to be caring for it and talking to your plants and stuff.
That's true. And that brings me to question one more to you, Darren. Now, you also teach people how to grow edible mushrooms, and you run workshops. So this is also quite easy way, right, to nurture your connection, because mushrooms are quite easy to grow. We can all have oyster mushrooms and not buying them for loads of money in the shop. Comment on that?
Well, you said it, man. If you do not know, mushrooms, my ecology, my slim is what is keeping us all connected, whether we know that or not. You know, I always make reference to the organic technologies. I heard earlier when we was talking about, you know, our disconnection through the technologies of today, like Wi-Fi, internet, Bluetooth, and all of that type of stuff. And I always make reference to the organic technologies that really exist that allow us to use our Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and keep us connected with each other and with things in nature. So with that said, the mycelium in the soil is what's making all that happen. It's keeping all the plants communicating. It's what's keeping us alive and breathing and all that good stuff. So yes, if you've got into cultivating mushrooms, you'll definitely build and forge or reignite your connection with nature. It's real easy. You can just go in skips and bins and stuff like that and find the resources to grow mushrooms on. And if you know a good forager or two, you know, you can harvest mushrooms that you know what they are with a bit of cardboard and some water and some straw to start growing mushrooms, you know. So it's like a real easy step into. So yeah, I do them with the it's the Psychedelic Society. So I do them with the Psychedelic Society as well. So, you know, you can check out their website and see some of the workshops, just go online, man. It's real easy. Yeah, so I would encourage that. And yeah.
I think I need to mention to everyone who's interested in techniques of growing, of easy growing, that me and Darren and a few other peeps at Psychedelic Society will be working on a masterclass video that will be released probably somewhere in July. So I encourage everyone to tune in because it's a great video with like very clearly steps, so you can't make a mistake. And also, as Darren said, I encourage everyone to try his shroom shops because yeah, you're there in a small group, hands-on experience. I've seen them at least 3 or 4 times already. Very good workshops. Mercedes, I have one for you now. How one can connect with nature? Give me more options, because we talked about going out, growing things, permaculture, and there's one we didn't talk about yet. That much.
I feel like I'm being guided for an answer.
You can answer whatever.
I did actually want to say one thing from like a disability lens, in terms of being able to get outside, that's actually not always an option for all people who might not have the physical ability to do that. I have a friend who actually lives in the UK, and she's chronically ill with Crohn's, and right now she literally can't leave her house because she's so high risk, and she's been struggling, but also she's now getting friends to bring her plants, and her apartment is like turned into a jungle. And the difference, she's just like amazed, because she knows obviously how helpful that is, but she was concerned about just not being able to breathe fresh air and be outside and feel the sun on her face, and just being able to bring it indoors has made a massive difference for her too. So just to remember that it's possible, like Darren was saying, it's in us and it's around us all of the time. So I think you're pointing to the use of psilocybin mushrooms.
Yes. And not only in general psychedelics. Yes. So basically I wanted to, what are your thoughts about connecting with nature with psychedelics?
Well, I personally primarily use, I have a relationship with and have been building a relationship with psilocybin mushrooms in that way. I'm fortunate to be able to live in nature and to be able to go out just outside my door, and to be in the forest and to be able to use them in that way. I've also been working with a couple of people on islands, specifically answering questions around what it means to be living through climate and ecological collapse, and specifically working with the mushrooms and asking those questions, and then sitting with what that means. And I mean, obviously, we've probably all been on psilocybin mushrooms or different kinds of hallucinogenic mushrooms before, and there becomes a really tangible change in being able to witness, the plants do speak to you and communicate with you, and that real, what sometimes feels ineffable connection becomes so much more obvious that it's not even a question anymore. That we are, like, obviously the trees are alive and all of these things are alive. And so being able to see it that way is incredibly powerful. I think it really shifts your perception of the world and of yourself and the people around you. I worked with a friend who has only recently come to working with psychedelics. And before that, she was, living in her concrete jungle and had never engaged with nature in that way, in any kind of way. And she started using psilocybin mushrooms and all of a sudden was shocked, was shocked that the trees were speaking to her and that they had this beingness to them. And then she was like, well, of course they do. It seems so obvious. It seems kind of insane that I never thought that before. But it also really helped her to uncover these really deep feelings of shame around being in like a colonized society, and that perpetuation of separation and powerlessness and disconnection that really pushes us into consumerism. and also that feeling of wholeness, that she felt a lot more whole and connect because she could see those connections, and that realizing that she is whole and she actually isn't disconnected from all of these pieces, and how that really shifted her framework for how she lives her life and how she also relationally connects with other people.
Thank you. Nikki or Darren, do you have anything to add on how psychedelics can nature connection?
Yeah, as Mercedes was just saying, it's about realizing that connection, and it's about realizing that in an embodied wisdom, embodied knowledge kind of way, which is a very sort of buzzword phrase that people are using at the moment. But it's that grokking that you are part of nature, and just really knowing it from within you, as Darren was saying, just so that it's not an intellectual level of knowledge. And psychedelics are particularly good at that because they strip away partly your ability to speak or even think in words. So it means that you have to experience the thing rather than think about it in a narrative way. So you're forced to fall back on those ancient ways of knowing and perceiving. That's part of how they work. But it's also that, as I was saying earlier, the destabilization of categories. So the edges blur in everything that you're looking at and the concepts that you have about things that you look at. So in the ontological belief status of looking at a thing going, is it alive or is it not alive? Those kind of things don't make any sense at that when you're in a sort of a reasonable dosage of psychedelics. So everything becomes alive. And something that I became aware of fairly early on when I was taking psychedelic mushrooms was the way that a lot of the things that we look at around us as objects, man-made objects, are actually made of things that were once alive. Like there's a fireplace next to me which is made out of a big slab of wood. And a lot of the stuff that's around here, there's like wool and there's more sort of natural things, but even things like plaster on the wall, that's made from limestone, which is made from a mineral in the ground, and that was a collection of ancient dead sea creatures. So a lot of the stuff that we have around us that we think of as being inert, just like matter, was at one part of the cycle of life. It was at one point part of a living organism. Most of the crust of the earth, when you look at it, was at one point a part of something that was alive. And when you start seeing things in those terms, which psychedelics tend to stretch out your awareness into, then that can be a really awe-inspiring, but also it changes your feelings about the stuff around you. Makes you understand how everything is alive and is potentially alive again. The fact that we're here as this sort of transient bit of, like, so I'm here and I'm the bit of nature which is currently talking about nature to you, which are bits of nature, and all the lovely people that are listening to us as well today. So it has that lovely sort of thing where we're just arising from the clay, and at some point we will turn back into the clay again. That's just how the cycle goes. And being aware of those cycles, instead of expecting everything to be like a linear, progressive, mechanical way of existence, which in an urban environment in particular is very easy to fall into. Being aware of that rising and falling, and the fact that just because you feel happy one day and not so happy the next, that's just how the cycles go. And not to be upset about those things. That's really important, especially as young people that are growing up, where you have these changes of mood and behavior, and so you shouldn't expect to be the same every day. Everything changes, and so that part of the sort of the up and downness and the rising and dissipating again, that's all part of something that psychedelics are very good at explaining, that sort of that visceral kinesthetic learning that we have from. Sorry, I rambled a bit there.
No, all valid points. Darren, do you have anything to add?
No, I'll just piggyback off that, and just delivered it in the way that I deliver it. It's technology, man. And that's what I see ourselves as, a form of technology. We're computers. When you take or insert the USB data key, which is the psilocybin, it opens you up. You get access to files and things that you don't normally have access to, or you're not aware that you have access to it. And that's just one of its configurations. That's one of the programs. And so I encourage the usage of in places where you can do it, partake in stuff, like in the Netherlands, and then going into, so you can do it in your home. You could do it in your home, for example, and just have a rock there, have a crystal, have a plant, And that in itself will start allowing you to see your connection just with one's object, but let alone you take that into the woods. And then like you saying, you know, hug a tree, touch the soil, all these things have benefits, whether you're under the influence or not. But the technology allows you, like Nikki said, to just kind of have a direct observation of it and the direct experience with it. And I think that's what really counts. That's why the plants are really good for, reconnecting.
I agree. I will invite Sam for a minute because he actually has something really cool to say about the connection between psychedelics and nature connectedness. Nikki, I'm going to take you off the screen for a bit, but please stay with us because I will invite you again. Bye. Okay, Sam, be ready. I'm coming for you. Uh-oh, is Sam there? Sam, can you reveal yourself in the chat? Can you type something to us? Uh-oh. Yes, okay. I will invite you in on the screen now. Please accept. Okay, Sam is going to be with us very soon. Hello, Sam.
Hi.
So, when I interviewed you 2 weeks ago, we're talking about this fact that you don't have to be in nature to take psychedelics and feel nature connectedness. I would like you to talk a bit more about this, explain this concept. And
so this is something really interesting, I think. So all the research literature sort of showing how to kind of increase nature connectedness, it all shows you've either got to be passively or actively engaging with nature with your senses, and like things like appreciation of beauty, meaning, empathy, compassion, these kind of emotions, when they're kind of linked to nature, are pathways to increased connectedness. But you very much have to be kind of like interfacing with nature in some way. That exercise I mentioned before about recording, making a note of a few things a day of things you love, and sort of appreciate about nature, like obviously that requires you to be kind of interfacing with nature in some way. But the thing that makes psychedelics interesting is that people, like in modern clinical trials involving psychedelics, like the settings tend to be pretty clinical. Like they're comfortable, but they're pretty sterile and fairly nature deprived. I mean, I've got to say, like the psilocybin for major depression room at Imperial, I helped set up with my good friend Ross Watts, who led the study, and I think we did a good job of turning a hospital room into like a really cozy, nice pad with Himalayan salt lamps, a little kind of like mister for essential oils, these big screens all around depicting woodland scenes, and it was amazing the effect just that setting had on people's experiences and stuff. But yeah, people in clinical settings, a good portion of the time they seem to experience this increased connection to nature despite having that experience in a nature deprived setting. And this is something completely unique that you don't see with any other nature connectedness enhancing practices. So what this says to me, as Darren's already says, like we are nature. Even if you're isolated from nature, we still are nature. And like psychedelics, they tune you in to your inner nature. So I think this is how they are able to kind of elicit this sustained increase in nature connectedness, even when not administered in a natural setting. And I think that's really something really interesting and significant. But going on from that, I think like, well, what about we start having like supported psychedelic sessions in natural environments, or get people out into nature before and get people out sort of as part of their integration into natural settings afterwards. Maybe have the psychedelic centers or clinics of the future in like beautiful natural settings, in woodland settings, where people can be in a kind of like controlled, secure, safe setting, but then they've got nature kind of all around them, that the sort of person leading the session can then titrate the level of nature depending on needs and wants. So I'm fascinated by the potential to use psychedelics to enhance nature connectedness, because we know we've got solid data now that psychedelics can help treat conditions which are otherwise very hard to treat. Things like addiction, major depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, existential anxiety, like things that are really tough to treat. Psychedelics seem to sort of have a great utility and value there. So, and they can assist in like recovery and improvement of mental health, but they can increase nature connectedness, which itself is associated with improvements in mental health. So why not maximize the both? We know that psychedelics in a clinical setting can kind of elicit this long-term improvements in mental health, but by maximizing the nature connectedness enhancing potential of them, you're opening up a kind of complementary independent pathway to improve mental health. So this is really important, and this is what I see as the next big step for clinical psychedelic use.
But are we far from being able to study that, psychedelics in nature? Do you think this is something that's going to be done within next 2 years, or?
It depends. So it depends where you are in the world. So I think the USONA Institute, which are kind of they're a sort of large not-for-profit, which is important, organization that are synthesizing psilocybin for a lot of the modern studies, and they're apparently building a sort of big kind of campus and sort of training facility for the next generation of psilocybin therapists, and it's very much in nature, and so it's going to be kind of building that into its sort of approach. But here in the UK, for example, like psilocybin is a Schedule 1 substance, so it's extremely strictly controlled. It cannot be used out of a monitored hospital environment. The research institute in question needs a license. The hospital where it's held needs a license. It has to be kept in a special safe. It has to be weighed every day under a CCTV camera and recorded. It's essentially like handling a radioactive isotope, and this is something that's like non-toxic, has been used for hundreds if not thousands of years, and has great medical utility compared to, say, Schedule 2 substances, a big step down, even though it's one scheduled classification. Things like heroin, diamorphine, cocaine, methamphetamine, substances with much more limited medical utility, much more greater addiction and harm risk profile. They are much more accessible to researchers and medical doctors, and that's a great travesty. And I see this is like a cultural hangover and baggage of the 60s that's still with us, and that's kind of like blocking very beneficial kind of medicines, compounds from people who really need them.
Thank you, Sam. And maybe quickly, I may say this, could psychedelics help us to move away from extractive practices?
Yeah, that's obviously a big question. I think it's possible. Obviously, I don't necessarily think that giving mushrooms or other types of psychedelics to the heads of companies, of like oil and gas companies, heads of these extractive resource companies, is necessarily like gonna shift everything, although that would be an interesting experiment also. But yeah, I think everything that we've said so far really leads up to that our understanding, that wonder and awe that we feel when we go into nature, and also when we are in nature or even in our homes, and using psychedelics and feel that connection, really inspires people to protect and to want to protect and serve nature in a different kind of way. And so if large amounts of people are able to start to feel that, then it's possible to put pressure on extractive resource practices and these companies that are trying to destroy everything that we have, and living in a more like closer to our own indigeneity of being connected to nature and connected to each other. And yeah, rambling a bit, but it's possible, I think.
What do you think, Darren?
Ultimately, I think we just need to take our own responsibility. I say that simply because a lot of what's being shared, you know, here and in general, I find that, you know, examples or models already exist. They really do. Models exist. And what I just think is that the people don't get credit for the models they've created. So I'm just giving examples of just indigenous cultures that have an understanding of how to work with these plants, how to work with the forest. You know, they do it, and they do it well, in my humble opinion. And what I've gathered is that they don't manifest the challenges or the problems that we face here today, where we may have to consider giving, you know, leaders psychedelics, for example, like as Mercedes suggested. But in the communities that I'm talking about, that's exactly what takes place. The leaders have to take psychedelics before they become a leader. So just like, yeah, they're just, so it's like, yeah, I know the direction we need to go in, but that's why my organization was called Ancient Future, because I really believe that the ancient models and principles will support us in the future. And I would just like for that to be considered in some way or another, with the scientists and the hippies and the corporates and the big pharma people, just to consider that there's some models out there, they really exist. We're talking about going out and doing integration, for example's sake. That's something that I personally campaign for a lot with the groups that I work with, because I know the power of the forest. And I'm also aware that that's what is part of the integration back home. That's how we integrate. We integrate through engaging the forest, through dancing, you know, through models that may not be the traditional way of healing, but, you know, in this part of the world, but it works, you know, it works. And that's why I guess we all like going out at the weekends and dancing and having a good time. But if you weave that into forest work, you know, your work can become fun. And that's what Nikki was mentioning earlier on, which I think is really important. So I don't know if that's just some of the thoughts that I had when, as you were sharing. So that's just my piece to it.
Thank you. Sam, do you have anything to add?
So a bit, maybe a slight deviation from that, but like one of the great potentials of psychedelics, I think there's a quote attributed to Albert Einstein, like, one cannot hope to solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it. And I think the great potential of psychedelics, particularly right now, as as our kind of species sort of has dominance over the earth, and the great cost that has come with that, is we need more consciousness. We need more like sort of we need more ideas, we need more perspectives, and psychedelics can like help. They're fuel for that, you know. So right now we need a broader, more expansive spectrum of consciousness to call upon. Is like something that could be immensely valuable, and would be really foolish to explore that avenue, I think.
So can you, Sam, back to you again, how psychedelics informed your connection with the natural world and also with other beings?
So for me personally, like, I've always had a really strong connection to nature, and I bond with nature. And this is before I can kind of like, before I could remember, like before memory, before I could walk or talk. I was like, I was born in Leicester, and then sort of with my mum, we kind of moved to the countryside when I was 2.5, and I've lived in nature really, well, apart from stints in London and Aberdeen, I've lived in nature sort of most of my life, and it's been a huge part of my life, ever like all my life, and like a great source of consistent and bottomless source of like peace and joy and intellectual stimulation as well. And I feel immensely lucky to have that bond. And this is what excites me about psychedelics, is for people who haven't, through circumstance, haven't been fortunate enough to sort of develop that bond with nature, through living in urban environments or whatever else. It can kind of connect people in quite a powerful, radical way. And massive respect for you, Darren, and the work that you're doing as well. Like, I feel like it's kind of like God's work. If the God of nature is Pan, then you are doing God's/Pan's work. So power to you, man. Well done. Like, really good. So yeah, for me, so then I funneled that interest into ecology, and ecology is the science of essentially the science of interconnection, the interconnection of living systems. It's like zoomed out biology. If biology is a study of life, it's one step back and looking at how that life and those living systems kind of interact. So that kind of, I guess, gave me a kind of intellectual kind of academic understanding of this whole theme of interconnection. The thing that makes psychedelics really interesting is they are tools that provide a direct experiential knowledge of that interconnection. So they're two different complementary pathways for the same understanding, the same knowledge. So that's why I sort of have valued the psychedelics and what they can do for others as well.
And before I will also soon want to invite Nikki, so I will soon also get you off the screen again for a few minutes. Cool. But just before we do that, I want to follow up with one more question. So did psychedelics help you sort of to radicalize your worldview and perspective in connection to nature?
So me in particular?
Yes.
Good question. I don't know who I would be had I not first, had that first ever sampled that first box of mushrooms that I bought in Camden all those years ago. I don't know where my life trajectory would have gone. So it's really quite a hard one to answer. Like, I think I was already dancing to the beat of that drum, and I feel like psychedelics kind of lit a fire under me to some degree, but I was sort of already on that path. But so it's hard for me to say, actually, being honest.
Thank you, Sam. Right, I will have you back again, but I'll see you soon.
Cool. See you in a bit. Bye-bye.
Okay, let's invite Nikki back. Okay. Yay. Oh, technology. Anyway, so while I'm waiting for Nikki, does any of you want to comment on the same? So how psychedelics shaped your personal journey with connection to nature and other beings? And I know you, Mercedes, already said something about it, but do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I was just thinking about how before taking psychedelics and in my childhood is really when I had exposure to nature through my family, being connected to it, and also just the joy and innocence of being a child and naturally realizing that connection. Like it didn't take any work or any sort of like outside influence. It was like very normal to talk to the plants or hug the trees. Or I also grew up, my early years were very unstable, and nature became like another friend, like a very stable friend that was always there for me. And so it was really normal. And I think as I got older, I got sucked into the system and self-image and ego and trying to like keep up with the Joneses. And as my healing process, burning out from that and then going into a more healing process through yoga and through activism. And also really, I was thinking about what radicalized me, because this question has come up a few times in the last couple of weeks, and through art was a huge piece, through documentary filmmaking, through being able to see the lived experience of other people that I had no connection to, and then to be able to build relationships with those people. And then, psychedelics just found me and weaved their way in there and became another tool, another way to build relationship, to really reconnect. And then that sort of naturally moved me also out of the city again. So I kind of went full circle back to being a child, running through the woods and riding horses and having the privilege of doing those things. And then realizing as I got older that that's really what I wanted to move back to. and the psychedelics and mushrooms in particular really helped shape that for me.
Thank you. And Nikki, how about you? What was the role of psychedelics for you in your nature connection? I know you probably had nature connection since you were young as well, so you can tell us about that too. And then how psychedelics kind of weaved into it.
Yeah, so I was really lucky. I spent the first 9 years of my life living on the very edge of a town. So there was houses and traffic in one direction, and then in the other direction there was a big park and some sort of marshy land with streams and things. And I was able to go there with my friends, and we just went and played all day because that's what you were able to do at that point. So I would just go off with my mates of the same age and go and hunt sticklebacks and then put them back in a jar, watch them, put them back in, and just go off into the park. And we'd go there like for ages and just play on climb trees, and so you're just sort of interacting with it in that kind of way. And then we moved sort of nearer into the middle of the town a bit more, where I had a garden, but there wasn't so much natural spaces. But my parents used to take us out quite a lot. We'd go out for a walk on a Sunday afternoon, drive out somewhere to a field and stomp around and do that. So I was quite lucky and able to be sort of in nature in that kind of regard. And also I was growing up at a point when David Attenborough was programming all sorts of nature programs on the telly, so I could watch those and feel really enthusiastic and intrigued by the fact that there were all these amazing environments and creatures and plants out there. I think that helped enormously with my sense of connectedness to nature, the whole sort of life on Earth idea, where he took us through the evolution of the different things that are on this planet in different organisms, and that was incredibly formative with my appreciation of the way that the whole of tree of life is one family. So that was where I came from there. And funnily, the psychedelics for many years for me were not linked to nature particularly at all. They were linked to going out to nightclubs. And it was only when the nightclub scene started to segue over into the festival scene, that the sort of the rave in a forest kind of thing, that's when that side of it would come through for me. Because initially, apart from occasional sort of like mushrooms around a bonfire in someone's sort of land or garden, the psychedelics were not an appreciation of nature thing. They were a thing for partying, for dancing, and for being sociable with, where Sam earlier was saying about how the sort of the broad aspect of recognizing different things in nature is the same in your brain as the recognizing the sociableness of your sort of your fellow species. So for me, those two things were sort of like the other way around. It enabled me to connect with people first, and then after that it sort of broadened out into the connection with sort of returning to the things in my earlier life of sort of knowing plants and animals, and it sort of then that came up as a sort of secondary thing. I think it was the first time that I took experienced 5-MeO DMT was in a woodland setting, and I can remember coming round from the initial sort of wave and looking up and looking around me, and everything was really crystal clear and sparkly, but it was very real. It was the trees, it was the sheepskin I was sitting on, it was the person sitting next to me, it was the spider web with the spider in it. All of those things were very, very real, like someone had turned up the CGI effect on reality to very good and very sort of like ultra crystal definition. And that for me was one of the moments. And it was like I'd seen everything for the first time. You know, when Aldous Huxley talks about the doors of perception being cleansed and everything is sort of like cleared, like when you're looking through a murky window and then it's sort of cleaned and you can see for the first time properly. That's what that felt like for me then. And it was like that sort of the hymn, which is about the morning has broken like the first morning, or the song rather. And it was like that. It was like seeing the paradise for the first time and seeing everything so beautiful and so alive. And that's something that I've really got from that moment, which is really surprised me in a sort of awe kind of way, but also made me feel like it was very normal to do that as well. It was like, oh right, yes, I remember what this is like. And it was like remembering how I'd seen things when I was a child.
Lovely.
So that's what psychedelics did. They allowed me to return to that, and that was part of the realization of just how important this experience can be for people. It also confirmed why it was so important for me to, because I think at that time I was doing my ecology degree, and it made me realize just how important that kind of study is, where you're looking at the different ways that everything connects and the different systems and how they all interweave with each other, and the fractal nature of everything from cell biology up to land management practices and all of the different things in between.
Yes, I like how Ben that some of us know, Ben from Fire Juice, he says in the documentary that me and Mercedes is doing that psychedelics brought back wonder in my life. And this is so, for me, big thing. I also grew up with nature, but then because of personal trauma and living in London, I got really disconnected from nature to the point that I didn't recognize trees on the street. I didn't look, and mindfulness and yoga help, but then psychedelics brought, because I've taken them again in the countryside and I saw a horse and trees and everything looked like impressionistic painting, and I was like, oh my god, I'm back here, and it just felt amazing. So they bring this moment. Darren, do you have anything to add from your perspective about
Yeah.
how psychedelics do it for you?
Yeah, it's kind of piggybacking off what Nikki was saying. It reminds me of something that I was told by my elders, as well as I've seen recently in one of those blockbuster movies. It was definitely Black Panther. I don't know if any of you got to see the Black Panther movie. There's a scene right at the beginning when they're moving, kind of landing into Wakanda, and as you approach the village, it's just a plain old forest or the jungle. But then as you get down into Wakanda, it comes alive, and just like how Nikki may have described it. And I was always told that, with my elders, when you see the elders in the forest, just hanging in the forest, don't think what you see is what they see, and it was always a reminder that they see the forest different to how you see it. And a lot of these are pretty much their way of life, is that they're under the influence and seeing the forest through those lenses that we don't often get to see through. So for me, my first radical experience was actually just taking a trip to the Caribbean. The first time I traveled to the Caribbean for the first time, and I got to see nature for real. And now I got to see what my mum was talking about, my grandparents had been talking about. So that was my trigger. And then I came back to the UK, and that's what started my whole food growing and, just wanting to get, pick it up as a hobby, not knowing that it was going to become what it was going to become. It became a part and parcel of my day-to-day life, where I trained and I ended up teaching this. But then the psychedelics, what it really made me appreciate more was just my immediate environment and the nature I have around me, and not looking over there. It's in Barbados, all the cool nature's in Barbados and in the Caribbean and stuff. No, there's some real cool stuff in Hackney Marshes. There's some real cool stuff in Epping Forest. And it was just my journeys with under the influence in spaces like that I got to see the magic there, that, it's the patterns and the cycles all over the place. So that's what it done, but it supported me in basically my career. It's the career I do now, man, in teaching and engaging other people in nature. That's how radical the experience was for me.
Yeah, so it did radicalize your worldview then. Psychedelics did radicalize your worldview. It's that, yes.
Yeah, I could definitely say so, yeah.
Same here. Same here for me. Just want to mention that last year, me and Darren and Sam as well, we were at Anthropos Festival. And I just want to but also Mercedes and Uniki, we all go to festivals in the forest. I just was wondering we're there in nature on psychedelics, dancing together. Is that ultimate nature connectedness experience? What are your thoughts? Nikki, maybe you can tell me first.
It depends who those people are, obviously. Yeah, I think you're getting you're getting that sort of kinship feeling and that relatedness reflected back from everybody around you, so you don't have to explain it when you're going, oh, the tree is saying this to me, and people just go, yeah, whatever, rather than being with people who are just going to look at you a bit funny. That's probably good, because it's going to encourage those things. I remember being in Prague at Beyond Psychedelics. They had the lovely fireplace outside where you could, or fire, there was a bonfire, and you could sit there and people were playing instruments and singing. And I remember stepping back from that into this sort of semi-industrial kind of place. It was like a little sort of grassy area. And I stepped back from it, and I could see these sort of these creatures sitting around the fire, making this noise and community with each other. And it was a really lovely sort of feel of how that nature connectedness, this sort of archetypal, eternal thing of people sitting around the fire making songs and happiness with each other. That's something that's been with us for tens, hundreds of thousands of years. We've done that since fire was invented. And those kind of things, those timeless moments outside of culture, that for me is the important part of the nature connectedness, is that it removes us from all of the cultural rules and constraints that we have to follow so much in all of our life. Things that dictate which gender we are, what race we are, all those different things. They don't just they don't disappear, but they become slightly less foregrounded when we're outside in a nature situation. So yeah, that's a moment that stands out for me as important.
Thank you. What do you think, Darren? Any festivals, nature, psychedelics? Is that a good combination or not a good one?
I guess it just depends who you are. You know, I come from a school of thought. My elder, Kalinde, rest in peace. He, you know, supported me onto taking the journey of the alone into the alone. You know, that's how I was schooled into psychedelics. And it's great having outdoor experiences and building and communing with people and community. But I personally feel that the reason why we feel disconnected with nature and people in general is just due to a disconnection with ourselves. And when you do that work of the alone into the alone, you do the work on yourself. And then when you come out of the cave and you start having to deal with people, you're in a better space and place to deal with people and nature and those kind of things. So I have another approach to engaging in nature, but I also understand that I've had some wicked experiences outdoors with people under the influence. So for me, it's the season. As we were saying, you know, some seasons I'm into doing it by myself, indoors in the dark. Sometimes it's by myself in the forest. Sometimes it's with people, and I get different things from all of those experiences, and they're all valid. They've all supported me. So I put them all up there as ways too. But yes, the forest dancing and psychedelics definitely is a good look.
Mercedes, did you have any thoughts? Did you have any experiences at festivals that were nice, profound in any way?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's obviously also really dependent on who you're around, because those situations can go sideways pretty quickly too. Yeah, I've had, similar to what Darren was saying, I was thinking to some of my most profound experiences on psychedelics have been alone in the woods. Being able to feel, I remember one of the first times I did a larger dose alone in the forest was I could feel and hear the trees breathing, and that just blew my mind. And I could see, like, you know, the grid lines in the sky. And but I've also, yeah, had festival experiences where all of these people who were strangers one minute became, you know, that we're all best friends the next minute, and that was really powerful too. And just feeling that sense of community that feels much more natural in a festival setting than it does when you're maybe in the city, and connecting to joy and having fun. I think sometimes I remember that I get caught up a little bit in the seriousness of the healing of psychedelics and you know, the mental health side, but actually, like, it's really good to just have a good time and enjoy ourselves and remember that joy is a really important part of healing as well. So
I agree. Yes, I think I will share that too. When I went to my first, like, really psychedelic festival, Sci-Fi in the Netherlands, I remember I was like on my way to healing my trauma, like understanding all of this, doing psychedelics, yoga, meditation, but I was lacking community. And I remember when I saw those, whatever, 10,000 people there at the festival, all super nice. Everybody was really nice and just kind and compassionate and lovely. And I saw them all dancing together in the forest with the beat, with no trash on the ground, because everybody's picking up their trash. It was really, really amazing to me, especially coming from British festivals that are a bit messy sometimes, loads of booze and trash on the floor. I remember I cried. I just started crying because I felt like I'm not alone, and there's 10,000 others like me here on very similar journey, and it was one of the most profound experiences in my life, I must say. It doesn't happen anymore. Now I go to festivals, I just kind of feel like a home. But that first initial one, I was like, wow, there's so many of us. So I have two questions from the audience here, which one is just a hi, so thank you, hello. But Darren, there was question, could you expand what you mean by alone into the alone?
Yeah. it's well straightforward in the sense of, you know, you do the psychedelics by yourself, you're alone, with no stimulants whatsoever, no sound, no light, no anything, just you or who you think you are, and then you start that journey into what we call going into the alone. So you might go through that journey of feeling connectedness and, you know, visuals and stuff like that, but it gets you to a space where you go beyond, you know, the physical stimulants internally as well as externally, and you know, you become one with yourself. You're the one. You're the one, the only one, and it can feel lonely, man. So yeah, that's the journey of the alone into the alone.
That's a pretty good explanation. So I just want to encourage whoever is listening to us now that if you do want to ask any questions, there's a button at the bottom of the screen that says ask a question. We have a bit more time, so feel free to type there. I have only one question to everyone, and I'm going to ask all of you and then probably remove Darren and ask Sam back on screen. But Darren, if you're still free to stay with us a bit longer for another half an hour, then I encourage you, because there might be questions specifically to you from the audience. But if you have to leave, that's also cool. I understand. So last question is that we're talking about the nature, mental health, the crisis, ecological crisis, all of those things. So in the end, are you hopeful for what's in the future? Who wants to start? It's a difficult one.
I'll jump in there.
Go for it.
I would say this. I'm hopeful because, again, simply because in some of my early, I think when I first left home, so I'm like 17, 18, got my own place, and I first got into consciousness with organizations, and there was something that was always repeated every week, every other week that I went there. And it's sad but true, but I feel that it's relevant in the here and now. And they said that, you know, true change / revolution won't take place until 99.9% of the people's backs up against the wall. And, you know, it's going to take real challenges, real shifts to get change. And we're in that season, man. That's how I feel. We've been in that season for a minute. It's becoming clearer. It's like how I feel, just like Nikki shared, going into the forest and having that lens to be able to see the forest. It's like people are now got the lenses that they can really see what's going on, you know, that a lot of this stuff has been going on, you know, and keeps, you know, it's not new, you know, it's not new. And more people are becoming aware of it, you know, and it's become heightened. So based upon that and the trajectory that we're currently on, I think, yeah, it's most people are responding in the right way. And I have hope. I have no other choice but to have hope. And then put the work in. Then you put the work in as well. You don't just sit on the hope. You put the work in, make it happen.
I agree. Any of you ladies, Nikki or Mercedes, do you want to follow that?
Yeah. So one of the things about having a sort of more ecological approach is that you can step back in a time kind of way and not look at things in the span of an individual's life, but look at things from a more sort of centuries or even millennium perspective. And if you consider things like climate change on that basis, we've been, as a species, or some of the parts of our species, not all of it, have been messing up the environment, the atmosphere, and various other sort of habitat destructions and things for, you know, a few hundred years now. But it's only in the last 150 years that it's begun to be really, really bad when we started to burn all the fossil fuels. And it was about halfway through.
Halfway through.
Oh,
Let me see.
so good there.
We have some technical issues. That's unfortunately, internet connections in UK are still not good, even though we're in the 21st century. What can we do? Okay, while we wait for Nikki, they say this. Do you want to jump in, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
So are you hopeful?
I am, but I feel like it's something that I have to work on every day. As someone who manages pretty severe depression all of the time, that it's a lot easier for me to go down that rabbit hole than it is to to be optimistic, but I think especially in the last week, I am cautiously optimistic that things are actually starting to break down, and that it's possible that real change could happen. So yeah, a cautious and also an active hope, like not just sitting back and being hopeful, but how to turn that into action, like Darren was saying, like continuing to do that work and continuing to sit with the discomfort of those moments when it doesn't feel hopeful, and knowing that will shift because it's constantly changing. So yes, in short.
That's good. That's fantastic. I think we have one question from the audience. I'm going to jump in with that quickly, waiting for Nikki. And if she doesn't manage to connect back, I'm going to invite Sam on screen. If any of you could provide information about what? Sorry? Okay, if any of you can provide information about that, that would be great. You talk about technologies and a USB into our interface. I think of it as keys from nature we plug into our brain. Which of the classic psychedelics most resembles the molecular make-up 5-HT or serotonin? In example, which key or USB key is the best communicator? Any takers for this question?
So I'm going to say, if I understand the question correctly, mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, and mushrooms in general. That's my perspective, simply because of the connection that they physically have on this organism that we call Earth, the role and function that they play, as well as the age that they are. In my, as I was taught as well, mushrooms predate, the plant kingdom by over 500 million years. Basically, they hold more data and information in them plants. Therefore, when you're using it as technology, they are pre-Earth. They have, unearthly origins. So they have a lot more data and information when you download them from iCloud into yourself. The ability to process, and get more out of it, in my humble opinion, my experiences.
Thank you. I'm just going to explain that we have a bit of technical issues with Nikki, and she might not come back. So we'll see if she does. I will invite her back to finish what she wanted to say. I'm going to try to get you up on screen. And in the meantime, I see there's some more questions from the audience. Do you think there are any risks that as psychedelics become legal in many parts of the world, that they are likely to become commodified, controlled by corporations? For example, the way large companies have moved into the legal cannabis market in North America. Any takers for that one?
Yeah, I think that is a very real worry, and I think there are already signs that is happening. Unfortunately, yes, like big corporations, big business, money people are interested in psychedelics, and they are actively maneuvering themselves to sort of try and reap the benefit of the sort of growing psychedelic wave. That's why there's an organization, Compass Pathways, that started as a not-for-profit and then switched to a for-profit model. I'm not convinced that was like a random thing. I think that was a deliberate sort of like maneuver. And I'm sort of like, have a sort of a bit of concern over some aspects of their approach, which I don't think I can really go into. But like an organization like Yasona, that's sort of a not-for-profit approach, I think that's sort of more intrinsically wholesome. And there are sort of other models. There's this interesting model, the Pollinator Model, developed by this guy Bennett Zellner, and that's sort of about using psychedelics and embedding them in a community-based, not for profit, and non-corporate, non-pharmaceutical sort of approach. But I think we need to be like the very powerful driving force of capitalism is going to sort of make inroads into psychedelics and how they're integrated. So that is something to definitely be mindful of. But hopefully, as things unfold, there will be more kind of options and more players sort of like moving into the space, and some of them will be better than others, hopefully.
Thanks, Sam. I also want to say that tomorrow at 2 p.m. we will have a panel about mental health and psychedelics, and we will talk more about mainstreaming of them and commodification and all those issues. So I invite everyone to join tomorrow at 2 p.m. The same link. Do you guys have anything to add to what Sam said already?
No, I think he hit it on the head. I think it's something.
I think so. Yeah. Thanks, Sam. There's also another question which I'm not going to read out. Apologies about it. This is really more about therapeutical mental health related issues than nature connection. So again, the owner of the questions, please join us tomorrow, and we will try to help you with your questions. And again, another one, Luis, this is also more about therapy, and we're here for the nature, so we're not going to answer that question either. Sam, I quickly want to ask you what I ask everyone else. Are you hopeful?
Yes and no. So there was a report published, the Intergovernmental Science on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services report, published in May of last year, and it's the most kind of comprehensive assessment of global biodiversity ecosystem function ever undertaken by 150 world experts from all over the world. Took 3 years to compile, looked at 50 years worth of data, and it was looking at the state of biodiversity and ecological systems on planet Earth and their current state. And the basic conclusion of this report was, like, we are facing globally unprecedented biodiversity loss and ecological damage and degradation, and without a full global mobilization on the scale of World War II and ecological mobilization, we are in deep, deep trouble. And interestingly, there's a few little positive points in this otherwise very damning report of our impact on the earth. And one of those was in areas under the control management of indigenous populations are the only places kind of on earth inhabited by humans that aren't undergoing ecological degradation, or very, very slow ecological degradation. There was a study recently that found areas inhabited by indigenous people can actually harbour greater biodiversity than protected areas that don't have any indigenous people there. So that's interesting. Like, what gives me hope is that we have these tools, these psychedelics, we have these tools of transformation of these nature connecting agents. That sort of gives me hope, as well as this kind of groundswell in ecological awareness and interest. You know, the UN has classified the following decade as the decade of ecosystem restoration, and I see that as one of the most important things we can be working for as a species collectively right now, is the restoration and regeneration of Earth's ecosystems that we have damaged. And we are an immensely powerful species, and we can affect very real, very positive change quickly if the will is there. And so I see psychedelics, like, unless we address the root cause of our disconnection, things aren't going to change. We've got the scientific evidence of the scale of the damage we've inflicted and are inflicting on the planet, and yet the knowledge alone is not sufficient to motivate behavioural change at the scale and speed it needs to. So what's it going to take? And my view is it has to be consciousness change. But we also know right now that obviously psychedelics in most of the world are highly illegal and criminalized and stigmatized. And looking at sort of some of the survey data I've been a part of, it's primarily a white middle class enterprise, unfortunately. There needs to be much greater inclusivity access, I guess, to psychedelics, because right now we psychedelic people, this community, it does exist in a bubble, and we need to remember that. We've got to like build bridges outside it, otherwise we're kind of like preaching to the choir, but it's a fairly small limited choir compared to sort of the global stage.
Thank you. Do you guys have any comments about what Sam just said?
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. Just something that comes to mind is just the psychedelic community needs to do its outreach work.
Yeah.
Simple as that. You know, all the work that I do when I work with young people, and you're trying to reach these hard to reach groups and people that are not turning up where you wanted to turn up, you've got to go out and make yourself visible. And I say that to say that myself and others that came out of our comfort zone, out of our communities, out of our bubbles, came to link with other bubbles, and the whole idea is that we can get that cracking. So that's what I'm out here trying to do. I know there's others out here doing it. I think we've got to kind of put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and and actually make it happen. So around these round tables, it would be good for it to be diverse. You can't have, like I would always say in the groups that I work with, we'll be sitting around the table making decisions for young people, and there wouldn't be any young people in the room. And I didn't want to partake in any of those meetings because I can't sit here as young as I thought I was. I'm not, it just didn't feel right, feel comfortable. So I always campaign for the young people be in the room when we're making decisions on their behalf or for them. So I think if you're making decisions for these diverse communities, whoever they are, that they should be in and around the space as well to make it work. So that's
true.
Yeah.
Agreed. Mercedes, do you have anything to add?
No, I echo all of those statements. Yeah.
There's one more question here from Louis again. Thank you for all your questions, Louis. Do plants communicate with each other through song? Any takers?
Sound.
Song.
Song.
I think they communicate through mycelium, no? Darren, do you want to?
I know plants communicate in multiple ways, in different
Can
ways.
you explain how plants communicate to each other?
So I won't go into it scientifically because I'm not the scientist here. I don't know, but I know just based on my experience, direct experiences, as well as just nature, that plants communicate with each other. Yes, through the mycelium network. They exchange nutrients and all that good stuff to make them physically, do what they need to do and communicate. They also let off pheromones, different scents that allow plants to engage and know what's going on in the environment. So if a human or an animal approaches or a plant gets picked, it lets off certain scents that other plants are able to pick up and identify, and they might get into their, protective mode, or come look at me, I'm over here, come grab me, come eat me. So they're out there communicating, and they communicate with us in other ways that we may not think, but it's no different from why we would go and pick an orange off a tree, because it's communicating with us. The colors, taste, all these things have been ways that plants talk and communicate with us. It may not be through words though. So do they sing? Yeah, I sing to my plants, they sing back, and I think there's definitely the ability to commune. Just to throw in, I think that's how the ayahuasca vine and many other plants and combinations have been discovered. When you speak to the elders and the people from those regions, and you ask them, how did you know? How did you find out? They say, the plants told us, the plants communicated with us. So, we've had experiences shared around here today, people talking about trees, talking to them and stuff like that. So, yeah, man. Yeah.
Sam, do you have any scientific thing to add here?
I mean, I don't know, because we're being asked to go into it scientifically, and I don't think there's much science on the capacity of plants to sing. I think it's kind of like, that's a future research avenue right there. But like plants do produce sound. The recent discovery is they produce hypersonic sound when they're stressed, when they're under attack, and that's a very recent discovery. And like plants, they might seem fairly inanimate, but they're aware of their environment and reacting to it in many, many different ways. I think beyond like humans. Like for instance, when a plant is being, I can't remember the species in question, but when it was being cut, it could tell the difference. The plant would tell the difference between when it was being cut with like a blade and eaten by a deer, because the defensive compounds in the plant would go up dramatically and very quickly when being consumed by the deer, but not when it was being cut by the human, by the tool, because it would be a waste of precious life energy to sort of go into making those defensive compounds. But I was kind of like marveling in the woods sort of not so long ago, and in an altered state and looking up at the sunlight coming through these trees, and I was like, the whole thing that Dan I think mentioned about technology, and I was like, I just said technology can alienate us from nature, but I was looking up at these trees and marveling at them as like living technology, like amazingly sophisticated. technology. And like, you know, we talk about the alchemists, like, and they were getting sort of like a hard on for turning lead into gold. And what like trees can do is they capture starlight, they capture photons from this star burning 93 million miles away, and they can convert it into matter. That like wipes the floor with anything that's discussed in alchemy. My book. I mean, that is amazing. And not only that, but the way they do it when the photon hits the chloroplast, like there's a bit of quantum wizardry that happens there as well. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's science, but it's also magic at the same time. It's amazing.
Sounds like magic. That's super fascinating. And we're slowly reaching the time to say goodbye. So just to mention, Nikki is not going to connect with us anymore, but she's sending everyone loads of love, and she really enjoyed chatting with all of you today. But one more thing is, I suppose, any final thoughts? Anybody wants to add anything? Did I miss anything in this really valid, good discussion that we had here?
You've done an amazing job, Anya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, really fun. I mean, I'd like to just say just quickly, like in terms of getting out to nature, there's so many things people can do, you know, and obviously it doesn't have to be psychedelics, like just going for a walk, going cycling, going running, beekeeping, fishing, like, you know, there's many different ways of getting out there and getting stuck in and involved in some way, you know. It's very inclusive, so like find whatever resonates with and interests you and go for it, you know. Gardening, permaculture, there's many different sort of pathways to doing that, so find what resonates with you and go for it.
Thank you. Diana says, do you want to add anything before we say goodbye?
Sorry, was that me?
Each of you, any of you, do you want to add any final thoughts for us?
No, I just want to big you up, Anya. I always appreciate when you invite me to your spaces and places to share and allow people to hear me spread my spores. I would just say, yeah, just like, you know, it's real easy, man. And I'm just piggybacking off Sam there. You know, as I teach people, it's as simple as going out and putting your hand in the soil. You know, it's that easy. It really is. You know, it's science that backs that. You know, just touching the soil, all the bacteria in there helps with your serotonin levels. It makes you happier. Just going out and touching the soil. So don't make it too hard for yourself. Don't make it difficult. And like Nikki said earlier on, like, make it fun. That's what I learned in my years, that you've got to make these things fun for yourself. Keep it engaging. And nature can be really, it can be 10 again. You know, be 10 again out there.
Thank you. Mercedes, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just echoing the same statements. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Anya. It's great to be here. Yeah, and just really encouraging people to embrace that childlike wonder that happens when you're in nature. I think as adults we can really get, you know, too serious or think that we're being too silly, and I find those moments of, you know, this is something I've been thinking about is slugs having sex. Has anyone seen slugs having sex? Have you seen it happening? It's the most mind-blowing thing. I saw it on like a BBC Planet Earth thing, and then I actually saw it in real life, and it was just like, it blew our minds. We were camping and we weren't on drugs of any kind, but that it felt like we were. And that moment of just like embracing, like, whoa, like everyone was like yelling and like just completely amazed by this experience that we never thought we would see, that we didn't even know existed. And just, yeah, not being so cool about it, you know, like be a geek and lean into your nerd, your inner science nature nerd.
Sounds good. I'm going to read up. Nikki cannot connect with Crowdcast right now, but she sent me a message on Facebook, bless her. She says, go into natural settings with as much of yourself as you can bring. Remember to breathe, remember the past, remember the future. Be kind to yourself. This work of reconnecting as individuals and as culture is going to take a few years. Keep a steady pace. Together we can do things differently, each just doing what their part is. Bless up. Bless up, Nikki. Thank you for your message. Mm-hmm. So I think last thing is to say that in 2021, if we're lucky and this is all over, We will meet in Anthropos in the forest close to Hertfordshire. And I think all the speakers that you've seen there are going to be there. They promised me we're going to continue the discussion there, because there's a question, how do we continue the discussion? That's how we do it. We meet next year and catch up with all our speakers and their new discoveries. And also then you can have a bit more one-to-one connection with them, which is much better than computer. So meet us at Anthropos next year, and in the meantime, all those speakers will be invited to the Psychedelic Society webinars, which I run. So just keep following us, and I'm sure soon Sam is going to speak, and I'll invite Mercedes and Darren as well. And keep checking Darren's Shroom Shops at the Psychedelic Society, and keep watching for the Shroom Shop Masterclass, again with Darren. So love to you all. Thank you so much. You guys were amazing with the questions, and have a great afternoon. I'll see you here tomorrow at 12 for a talk about the racial justice and decolonizing the mind. So tuned in at 12 tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.